Today we're going to be talking about rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. And we're going to be going over the definitions. A rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. And another idea or another fact about a rhombus is that the diagonals are perpendicular. So I've labeled in this rhombus that the sides are congruent. But also, if you were to draw diagonals in, like so, they would be perpendicular to each other. That's supposed to be a right angle. Now, a rectangle is a parallelogram with four right angles. Now, another fact about rectangles are that the diagonals are congruent. So if I were to draw in the diagonals, and let's say I were to label the vertices of this rectangle A, B, C, D. If this is a rectangle, side AC should be congruent to side BD, or I shouldn't say side BD. AC, the diagonal AC, should be congruent to the diagonal BD. They are equal. Let's move on. A square. A square is a parallelogram with four congruent sides and four right angles. So I've labeled all of the sides as being congruent, and the angles are all right angles. The other things that you should know about this, the diagonals are perpendicular, and the diagonals are also congruent if you were to draw those in a square. Now, what I'd like us to do is look at each of these statements and say whether this is sometimes the case, always the case, or never the case. Now, the first statement is a rhombus is a rectangle. Well, let's think about it. A rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. And let's think about what a rectangle is. A rectangle is a parallelogram with four right angles. So if it happens to work out that the parallelogram has the if the rhombus has four right angles, then we can say that it would be a rectangle. But otherwise, it wouldn't be. So we're just going to have to say sometimes that is true. Not all the time, but in a special case where all of the angles are right angles, yes, that would be true. A parallelogram is a rectangle. Well, not all parallelograms are rectangles. Some of them are. So we'll say that that also is sometimes true. A rhombus is a parallelogram. Yes, absolutely. That's by definition. Definition of a rhombus, a parallelogram with four congruent sides. So this is always true. A square is a rectangle. Well, let's look at the definition of a square. We'll pull this right up. A square is a parallelogram with four congruent sides and four right angles. Well, a rectangle is a parallelogram with four right angles. The sides can be congruent. So, a square is a rectangle. It's always true. It's a special type of rectangle where all the sides are the same. And the last one, a rhombus is a square. Well, a rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. It would be a square if all of the angles were 90 degrees. So that is a case where a rhombus would be a square, but it's not always a square. So we're going to say this is sometimes true. Let's move on. PQRS is a rhombus. Find the lengths of the sides. Now this is obviously not drawn to scale because in a rhombus all the sides are congruent. So in this case, we know that 2y plus 3 would have to be equal to 5y minus 6, since the sides are congruent. So let's find the length of the sides. First, we have to find what y is. So we'll subtract 2y from each side, and we'll get 3 is equal to 3y minus 6. We want to get y alone, so we're going to add 6 to each side. And we end up with 9 is equal to 3y. Divide each side by 3, and we have that y is 3. Now that's just what y is. We want to know what the actual length of the sides are. So we're going to have to plug 3 in place of y. So 2 times 3 plus 3. That gives us 6 plus 3, which gives us 9. So this side is 9. Well, it should turn out that the other side is 9 as well. Let's just test it. Plug in 3 in place of y. 5 times 3 minus 6. 5 times 3 is 15. Minus 6 is indeed 9. So every side should be 9, since it is a rhombus. Okay, let's look at this next one. Is PQRS a parallelogram, a rectangle, a rhombus, or a square? Well, let's see what we know about this. We know that the diagonals are perpendicular to each other. Okay, so when the diagonals are perpendicular, we know that it is a rhombus. Now, if the diagonals were both perpendicular and congruent, we would know that it would be a square. However, by looking at these diagonals, they don't look like they're congruent. They just look to be perpendicular. So we're going to say that this is a rhombus. We'll say the diagonals are perpendicular, and I'm just going to use the symbol for perpendicular. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.